Right, and so welcome to our kind of first week, the full week of 12 for the Right to Publish course. We call it a course, but it's not for credit. It's just a way that we can talk about this as maybe a seminar, or a way for us coming together regularly over, 3 months to have a conversation about how it is that we publish, how we put together articles for publication in particular. Today's conversation is about abstracts, but I will also start with a little bit of information about the course and just reminding folks about what this is and the context in which we'll be coming together over the next few weeks. So we'll do course announcements, and I'll try to give you kind of itineraries and just kind of heads up of what the topics are for each day and what we're talking about. If for some reason you can't attend, then you know that the recording will be posted to the Canvas site, and then you can access it again. I try to keep the recordings to about half an hour-ish, so we can also have additional time for conversation. So we'll talk about the Canvas course and that certificate kind of weekly assignment. If you want to do this first certificate, you are more than welcome to. You just need to submit. And the steps along the way are great for those of you who are learning along the way. And so those assignments are designed to help you focus and practice with the content of the topic that we're talking about each week. I can talk with you about abstracts, for example, today, the different types of abstracts, the characteristics, and have you do a sample abstract and give you some tips, right? And in each one of those areas, it seems to me like if you're sitting and taking it in as information, can make it really difficult to sit down and practice it if you haven't really worked through more than just half an hour of listening. So you're kind of like, oh yeah, I get it. That makes sense. Oh, that's very, very common sense. And then you sit down to do it and you're like, wait a minute, that's just a little bit harder than I thought. So those weekly assignments are designed to give you some working time. They shouldn't take you more than half an hour-ish for anything that you're doing in those. And you can just set a timer, and if you can do only half an hour and you're still not completed with what it is that task was or that assignment, you can just leave it there and submit it and you still get credit for that. Or you can go back and, if you want to spend a little bit more time practicing, you can always do that. All right, so just some reminders and some information about the course, because I know not everyone could make last week's information session. There is a syllabus on the Canvas course. I can also pop it into the chat a little bit later if you need me to deliver it here. But again, we meet on Mondays, and there are some additional options that can help you through the week if you'd like to. There are some show up and write sessions that are drop-in, in-person, and virtual. We're just announcing those. Those are just on the website now. We're still looking for additional writers. So if you'd like to have some community and some writing time scheduled in for your writing your article or anything else you want to work on during the semester, we'd love to have you come and sign up and show up to host a session. That way, basically what you do is you hold the session open and available for other people to come and join you. And we know that from data on writing in social spaces that people write more because someone else is there. And it's not a kind of like, you must do this, but it's a kind of like, we welcome you to do this. There's a coffee shop, just as an aside, coffee shop in Japan, where you pay people to nag you until you get your writing goals met. You write down your goals, and then they're paid to nag you until you get them done, which seems a little intense for me. So we don't do that here. But close up, and feel free to email me. It's also quinn@colorstate.edu or issue rights. The topics, as I mentioned earlier, these are subjects that are common to building out manuscripts, not just for publication, but they can also work for chapters. The different elements of, abstracts and literature review, for example, we'll talk about those. We'll also talk about things like feedback and organizing and getting flow and your openings and your conclusions. So some of it's process, some of it's about the product and kind of what you're putting together. And then there are other things like open access and ORCID on October 7th, and we'll have Kalita Thomas from the libraries come in and talk about those and talk about it from a librarian's perspective and give you really good advice on when you're looking to publish in open access journals. So some it's also kind of contextual and informational. Same thing with cover letters or responding to readers. We put all of that within the context of publishing. I mentioned the Canvas site. So if you go to Canvas, this is what it looks like. I think you have to click on the little arrow, right, and drop everything down. So it looks like maybe I haven't already posted last week's recording, so I'll go ahead and do that. But there's information on all the things that I just mentioned with Show Up and Write, for example, the syllabus. There's also information on international rates for those of you who are non-native English writers and would like to go and get additional feedback and information and lessons on Thursday with a professor from English who works with teaching English as a second language. And then there's data writing groups, and those are held today on Mondays before this session. And if you're looking for additional accountability, you could have a writing session that builds up if you have the couple hours before this session from I think 1 to 2:30. That's when those run. And so you could get some good writing done and then come to this course. So the weeks are largely available, I think, right now. But you'll notice actually there's one that needs to be taken out. But so that first week, there's information, the handouts of things that we talked about last week. Oh, and there's the recording, so it should open up. And then there is an assignment, and that's the manuscript status in your 12-week plan. And so you just pop that in. Oops, sorry, slides went awry. This week, we're talking about abstracts. There's also additional information in those handouts and things that I'll be referencing today in the slides. I'll also post the slides, by the way, for the presentation, as well as this recording for the presentation. And then there's a journal list and abstract kind of assignment, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. And that assignment is just 2 things. List between 5 to 10 suitable journals for your manuscript. So I heard some of you have very specific journals already picked out and you know what you're working on. And some of you may be thinking, where would I publish what it is that I'm working on? And so the goal is for, if you're in that latter category, find where it is that you would want to publish. If you're in the former, if you already have a journal in sight and you know kind of what it is that where you're targeting, also keep in mind that there may be additional journals, maybe not for a special topic, but that there may be additional journals that you're going to want to be publishing in. And it's good to have a list of journals always at the ready, knowing that these are the places where you read and these are the places where you want to publish in, because that's part of the ongoing conversation in your field. And then the second part of the assignment in Canvas is about drafting your abstract. And that is, again, if you have enough and you know what it is that you're writing about, you can just kind of play around and see what an abstract might look like. Also check out those suitable journals list that you have and see, what do the abstracts look like for that journal? They are not the same across the board. And so just see like what are they doing? What type of abstract are they putting together? And we'll talk more about that now. So you can get a sense of like there's a range of abstracts and styles and types. So let's talk about that. This has one of those handouts on the Canvas course. But when we look at the primary types of abstracts and their characteristics and the kinds of information that's found in most abstracts, just know that that is in a handout, and it's a great reference, just a quick tool for you to be able to pull out. And the primary types are if they're results driven and they focus on your findings, or if it's a summary abstract and it kind of summarizes the breadth of your article. If it's structured, where they want to have it very structured out, and usually that has even the titles of like introduction, literature review, methods, and it'll elongate it, but there'll only be 1 or 2 sentences for each of those categories usually. Lay abstracts can be written for general audiences and general readers, and sometimes journals will ask you to do that. And then graphical abstracts, that may also be something that would be in addition usually to a text abstract, and that's where you create a visual graphic of what it is that your argument is, your findings, kind of what the significance is of your project. But if we think about abstract in general, abstract itself just denotes the idea or quality or state of something. It is representing something else, right? So that's that kind of general if you're modifying a word, right? That's the adjective form of it. It's not concerned with the particular or the details. Notice that it's kind of general, right? and it may be insufficiently factual. So when we talk, well, it's only abstract, or I'm abstracting this idea, it's insufficiently factual or practical, right? Dealing with those generalities. So that's the quality that we find in the word, but abstract can also be a noun, it can be a thing, and that is a very clear summary or abridgment of something specific, like that larger manuscript, that it encapsulates in miniature the characteristics and qualities of something else, and also, again, in general way. And so it's nice for you to just keep that in mind and thinking about the connection between the abstract and the work that you have written, your manuscript. There are kind of slightly different ones, and I mentioned this already based on that, but there are primary approaches that you could take to writing those abstracts. Results driven, right? Concentrating on your findings. Summary driven, a 1 or 2 sentence synopsis of each section. They could be structured in that way also, subheadings similar to a paper. That lay one, a brief summary written for members of the public rather than just researchers, right, or experts, right? You're writing to non-experts. The value of that is that you would have 2, usually if you're publishing in a journal that requires lay abstracts, you're publishing for expert audience or expert readers and then non-expert readers. That's really helpful. Those journals are usually helping you make the connection to journalists or science communicators, people who are not necessarily experts in the field, but who want to know and translate for others. And so you might be writing in journal, a journalist might pick up your work, for example. The importance of learning how to write abstracts is, well, it's just really important. It's increasing in part because our attention span, I think, for reading full-length articles is less and less. The amount that we have to read is more and more. So they are increasingly important for pitching and introducing your research in your manuscript. So even when you don't have a full manuscript written to be able to summarize fully, the sense that you do know what all of those component parts and what it is that you're going to be saying in all of those component parts is really important. It can also be important for if you're reaching out, and we talked about querying last time, querying editors. When you query an editor and you say, hey, I've got this paper, or I've got this manuscript in the works. Maybe it's in the works, meaning that you have like 2 or 3 pages of 25 or 30 written, but it's in the works and you just want to query and see, would it be a good fit? Then it's really helpful to have that full abstract for you behind the scenes. You would not necessarily, however, send that full abstract right away at that time. It just gives you enough confidence to know, yeah, I got something here and it's worth me being able to pitch at that time. You always have to see the publisher's guidelines for the format. I will remind, I think, probably every single session for people to check publisher's guidelines, in part because it's so easy to forget them and be thinking that you're writing for one journal and realizing that their publishing requirements are slightly different. So just check that, and oftentimes there will be word requirements, word limitations on abstracts, not to keep them kind of tidy and concise. This is an image that I pulled from Hilary Glassman Deal's book on scientific writing for, I guess it's non-native English writers, I think is how she's titled the book. But so I think it's great for everyone. And she has this kind of clear kind of structure for the shape of a research article or thesis. This is probably very familiar for those of you who write in that IMRAD, that introduction, methods, research, results, and then discussion style of article. And the abstract, notice where that is. It's just like sitting on top of everything else, but it really is a version of this kind of diagram. You still have something that introduces the topic. You still have something that states what the methods are. You still have something that states a version of the results. And of course, what it is that you conclude or the significance of it. By doing that, by concentrating what it is that you are giving your readers, you help them identify pretty quickly on whether they want to spend more time reading that article. And I think we understand that from a reader's perspective as well, that we know that we skim through those abstracts and we're like, is this relevant? Do I need to spend more time with this? Will this be helpful? And abstracts that are confusing or we're not quite sure, it's quite likely that we won't read that article, right? We won't pursue it further unless somebody says, oh, that article was actually really good. The abstract just was terrible, right? So I'm going to take you through a Brevia piece. I use this, by the way, A Wandering Mind is an Unhappy Mind by Matthew Killingsworth and Daniel Gilbert. Daniel Gilbert was the PI and Matthew Killingsworth was a graduate student. And they did a study a number of years ago. It's probably, 15 years ago now, where they, and I think it continued on for a while, but they did study and look at how it is that people's minds wandered during tasks, during everyday kind of activities, rather than just in the lab. And the summary piece was a Brevia piece in Science in 2010. Science stopped doing Brevia pieces, so I pulled occasionally from them on different topics. But this one is it's so easy for us to use, and the topic is interesting. And it doesn't have a lot of specialized knowledge where we have to kind of parse or kind of move across disciplines. I think it's broadly kind of understandable across anywhere from the humanities through the social sciences into the STEM fields. So that's one of the reasons why we use it, and you'll see it more than once. Just know that. Which will also actually be helpful for you to kind of see how things are put together. But for publishing purposes, that abstract is generally, mostly, right, derived from a written article, unlike a proposal, right, for work to be done in a proposal. So I'm going to take you through this paragraph by paragraph. If you look at how this Brevia piece is structured, there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraphs, right? And so we've got all of them here highlighted, and you will find these sheets on the Canvas course. But we just want to go through and look at the topic sentence of each one. That's the point of that paragraph. So we're just going to land on the points. We're going to hit all the points to see what, if we shrunk it, right? If these are all the key points, if we have 7 points, how does that condense into an abstract? It's also a great way for you to think about the tidiness of having really clear topic sentences at the beginning of a paragraph, because you can then pull them and say, okay, if this is the topic sentence for my introduction, if this is the topic sentence for the first one and the one that holds all of the literature review together, if this is the one that holds together the methods, can you do that? Can you condense and pull it together as a summary? Abstract. Oops, sorry. So this first sentence, we're thinking about, unlike other animals, human beings spend a lot of time thinking about what is not going on around them, contemplating events that happened in the past, might happen in the future, or will never happen at all. Okay, so this is the context. We're going to go to the next one though. Indeed, simios independent thought or mind wandering appears to be the brain's default mode of operation. So this kind of gives us the context, right? It's like, what are people not thinking about? This first sentence is really written for non-experts, and the next one kind of takes us and says, indeed, stimulus independent thought or mind wandering is maybe appears, that's the key, right? Appears to be the brain's default mode of operation. Is that true? Kind of like we got to look at that a little bit further. So that's why I kind of pull those together as one sentence. Paragraph 2, we're going to have some background. So laboratory experiments have revealed a great deal of the cognitive and neural bases of mind wandering, but little about its emotional consequences in everyday life. And so this is what we're getting to specifically. How do we measure that? What do we do? We put together a web application for the iPhone. This is our methods, right? Which we use to create an unusually large database of real-time reports of thoughts, feelings, actions of a broad range of people as they went about their daily activities. Now, yes, and by the way, this is one sentence. I just want to point it out. You can have really long sentences. This one is carefully crafted and it's still readable, but just know when you have that many lines, if you go beyond 4 or 5 lines, usually your reader starts to feel a little weary. But I'm going to skip most everything that's in the parentheses, additional information. I'm just going to go with what the main information is. So to find out how often people's minds wander, what topics they wander to, and how those wanderings affect their happiness, we analyzed samples from 2,250 adults who were randomly assigned to answer a happiness question, answered on a continuous sliding scale from very bad to very good, an activity question answered by endorsing one or more of 22 activities adapted from the day reconstruction method, and a mind wandering question about something answered with one of 4 options. No, yes, something pleasant, yes, something neutral, or yes, something unpleasant. Okay, so that's all of their kind of methods and what they're describing and on what they did. Now we get to what were their findings. First, people's minds wandered frequently, regardless of what they were doing. You know, I always think like, how many times did my mind wander since we've been talking about this? Second, multi-level regression revealed that people were less happy when their minds were wandering than when they were not. And this was true during all activities, including the least enjoyable. Paragraph 7, third, what people were thinking was a better predictor of their happiness than what they were doing. So thinking versus doing for predicting happiness. And there's a paragraph 8, which is the conclusion. In conclusion, a human mind is a wandering mind, and a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. This has a lovely kind of symmetry to it, this piece as well. You notice that returns us back to the title. So their title is also an indication of their argument as well on what they're saying. And so it's just really kind of nice and tidy. You can take all of those topic sentences and you can put them together and you basically have an abstract. Again, if you have really clear topic sentences that kind of pull a section together, your main point for all of your sections, you could do that. Maybe that's not your style, maybe that's not how you need to be writing, but if you could condense everything that you're saying into basically a couple pages, and then condense it down even further into an abstracted form, that might be a way to go about doing that. If we take out that kind of unlike, right, and we start with the stimulus independent thought, appears to be, we're at about 179 words, which is pretty close. And I'm not going to go through all of it again, but in the characteristics of abstracts, you can have indicative abstracts that describe what was done and informative abstracts that focus on the main findings or analysis. And so this one is really more kind of like what it is that they did, and then there's some informative at the end, but it's really, it includes what it is that they've done. John Swales and Christine Feeks, they talk a fair amount about writing in general, but in genres, and that's kind of their bread and butter in writing about how graduate students write. And they say in some very complex papers, or those that are very theoretical, as in mathematics, it may be impossible to report findings, and for those we would expect more informative abstracts. And so if you're trying to figure out, like, am I writing something that indicates what I did and then what I found, versus informative, which is just kind of really focusing on the findings or the analysis, it might just be the nature of your field, right? So for me in literary studies, I don't write many indicative abstracts because I'm not identifying how it is that I did my analysis. I'm informing folks of what my analysis shows. And so it might just, if it's helpful at all to think about that characteristic and putting it together, use it. If it's not, just forget it, don't use it. Thinking about word choices in abstracts, again, your concentrated space, you got to choose wisely. So those key terms should be consistent with your article or proposal. Specialized terms, you can modify them for lay abstracts for sure. It might take a few more words, might become a little bit more wordy, you know. And then those verb tenses of the article, they may vary from field to field, but if we're looking at verb tenses, oftentimes that introduction is in the present, for example. Our literature review is also maybe partly in the present, depending on your field. Your methods is likely going to be in the past because that's what you have done, right? So there are places where you're going to move from present verb tense into past verb tense, maybe even future verb tense at the very end, right? Where you talk about the future of this work. So you don't have to, in an abstract, stick with only one verb tense. You have to be strategic in kind of pointing out how it works with what section of your article you're writing from. Just a quick side on lay abstracts for those of you who are going and perhaps are tied to medical fields. And just to note that some universities as well have gone to including lay abstracts for those non-expert audiences. And I'm not going to go through all the features of it, but just know that you could look up lay abstracts, and you can just see how it includes good information, but it's not high it's not a lot of jargon, it's not a lot of specialized language, and jargon itself gets a bad rap. But if it's used as language that is speaking to an appropriate audience, then it's just specialized terminology that you need to use. But if your audience is not specialized, you write to them differently. So for example, a number of new cases in kidney cancer. All right, self-citation and how does it pay? I'm going to move through this one really quickly as well, but just know that this is an article about self-citation that I think it's appropriate for us to be talking about this in a publications course as well. I won't refer back to this article. I won't refer back to it in any other way other than just the abstract, but it is useful to be able to see kind of how it is that they structured it out. It too is a summary abstract, and it's also about ultimately about their findings. So if we start with the first one, I'm just going to read that. Self-citations, those where authors cite their own works, account for a significant portion of all citations. These self-references may result from the cumulative nature of individual research, the need for personal gratification, or the value of self-citation as a rhetorical and tactical tool in the struggle for visibility and scientific authority. So there are reasons why people self-cite their own work for may result, right? Many different reasons, right? They find that in this article, we examine the incentives that underlie self-citation by studying how authors' references to their own works affect the citations they receive from others. We report the results of a macro study of more than 500,000 citations to articles by Norwegian scientists that appeared in the citation index. Notice then we move towards what it is that they've done to now what it is that they show. We show what the results are, show that the more one cites oneself, the more one is cited by other scholars, just an FYI. Controlling for numerous sources of variation and cumulative citations from others, our models suggest that each additional self-citation increases the number of citations from others by about one per year, and by about 3 after 5 years. And then moreover, there's no significant penalty for the most frequent self-citers, which is always a problem in fields, by the way. This is not ethically, you don't want to be citing yourself all the time. It's just seems to be, it moves your numbers. The effect of self-citation remains positive even for very high rates of self-citation. Oops. Sorry, and I thought it was going to go back one more, but it doesn't. So these results carry an important policy implication for the use of citations to evaluate performance and distribute resources in science, and they represent new information on the role and impact of self-citations in scientific communication. So they give us a sense of significance, why it's important in this very endpoint, but they also kind of note, you could pretty much get a sense of like what's going to go on in the rest of this article. You're going to read this if you are interested in publication, in the ethics of self-citing, right? On the metrics of how it is that we determine, rank, right? And whether it's valuable to include citation rankings. So there's a reason why you would want to read this article. And what I love about it is it just kind of goes through and takes you, again, in a readable way for even people in the field through a paper with an abstract. All right, and I'm just going to take us through, and this is not the first or the last, this is the first, but it may not be the last time. How's that? For just a little bit of grammar and kind of looking at how it's structured. The subject of a sentence is necessary, and it's usually a noun or a proper noun. It could be a pronoun as well. And the verb is the verb, but anything that can connect to it as part of the predicate. And it's not, you don't have to love grammar to follow this. I'll just kind of take us through because I want us to look at then how is this abstract structured, or what the sentence is about. The action or that condition of the subject is another way to talk about it. And then the object of kind of who or what is affected by the verb. All right, so let's take a look at, the self-citations and subjects, self-citations. And the verb that goes with that is after the second dash. So self-citations account, and then authors cite is kind of another subject verb that's embedded in that. Self-references may result. We examine something that underlie. We report that appeared. We show. One is cited. Model suggests. Self-citation increases. Penalty is, that structure, sentence structure is odd, but just trust me, penalty is the subject of that sentence, and it goes back to is the verb. Effect remains, results carry, and they represent. If you write your abstract and you have a lot of is words, because notice where is here on a kind of strangely structured sentence, and here next to is cited. If you have a lot of is, was, were, be, being, been kind of verbs, those are wimpy, kind of like they don't carry a lot of weight. They don't move the story along. All of these are pretty strong verbs in some way, shape, or form, right? Cite, account, result, underlie, report, show, suggest. Okay, so you get my point that the verbs are going to carry the story. And if you have a short, condensed space in order to tell the story of your research as you do in an abstract, you want to make sure that you have really strong verbs. So again, these verbs are all pretty strong, and there are some also subordinate clause verbs, but even those are pretty strong: underlie, cited, increase. So if you ever feel like you're writing sentences and they're repeatedly boring, one right after the other, it may actually be that you're having verb problems, and just have a conversation with someone who can help you see the verbs if you're not catching it in your own writing. And it can make a world of difference on the story that you tell about the work that you've done and what you found. And so again, you just kind of look at it. Your abstract would look something like this, and that's a good spread of verbs throughout. All right, so just some tips. Begin from a structured outline or a complete research article if you already have it, a presentation or a proposal. That's what Wendy Belcher recommends, that you don't start just cold and say like, all right, I'm sitting down to write an article and now I'm going to write my abstract. You really need to have something that you've been thinking about, that you have enough worked out, that you've thought about it in ways that structures the story a bit, that maybe that's like outline or kind of the research article. And then you can come back and start saying, okay, if I'm going to abstract this out, I'm going to just say kind of in a condensed form, what is it that this is about? Then you might have enough to go with. Abstracts, because they're condensed, they read easy, but they are the culmination of having already done a lot of thinking about your project. You can reverse outline and look at role model kind of abstracts, and we'll have a whole section on and Monday conversation on reverse outlining. And before you submit to a journal or funding agency, just read a dozen or so abstracts that are connected to that publication to identify their common patterns and even individual styles of specific authors. A little bit about research writing as a craft, because that's what we're doing. We're kind of putting things together here. Just remember that you're entering into an ongoing conversation and that you're just sharing what it is that you know about this particular topic. That words are necessary, and they're the fundamental tools by which we craft that story. And what's great about writing is that you can go back and you can edit and change and alter, right? Until it's kind of out there. And then just make sure that you have plenty of time to do that process, to draft it out, to revise and to polish, get feedback from others. Just a quick reminder that if you're here and you want to do that certificate course, just submit something about the 5 to 10 suitable journal articles for your manuscript, and then think about your draft abstract. What would that look like? What would those models look like? These are just a place for you to kind of be practicing and thinking about the ideas that I put forward every single week. I do not grade them in the same way. I may give a couple comments here and there and go, oh, hey, that's interesting. If you want some more feedback on them, please reach out and let me know and say, hey, could you please give me some feedback? Because I think this is really important on this area. Otherwise, I kind of just kind of go through and go, well, that's interesting. All right, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to stop the recording. And